Hi, I'm Matt. Welcome to my second video in this series of hopefully many. This one is on marking and feedback. Last week's was on academies briefly. Thank you to Vinye Kazocek, Mr. Rogers, Leanne for your comments. I think at the time of posting that video there were about 16 followers, so hopefully I'll get a few more comments this week. I'll start off with something relatively controversial perhaps. Probably within the first few months of teaching, I thought I'm morally against marking. Now let me just try and justify why. It became very apparent very early on that teachers will use AFL in lessons to gauge the understanding of their pupils. So they will maybe use perhaps mini whiteboards, ask all pupils to write an answer on those, immediately gauge who gets it and who doesn't, and use that to inform their teaching. And of course pupils can use it to inform their learning. And teachers will do this a few times in their lesson to make sure pupils understand what they're teaching them and to see if there's any evidence of progress. Now, as well as that sort of in-lesson assessment for the teachers' and pupils' benefit, there will be marking, probably, especially in maths, but a lot in other subjects, by pupils themselves, or peer evaluation is very common. And then you've got summative assessment, which sort of tracks progress over a longer period of time. So testing is often used, pre and post tests, so you can gauge assessment over a period of a topic. Yeah, there's lots of things. I'll talk about some assessment methods in later videos, but my point is we assess a lot, and to then take books home and mark loads of tick, 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 and then maybe write a comment which may or may not get ignored, maybe an effort grade, maybe behaviour grade, and all this other, there's so many criteria that could be included in marking that it just takes up so much time. I mean, if I teach, say, 5 lessons a day, and there's an average of 25 kids in those lessons, that's 125 kids. And if I teach, and if I mark, say, 2 minutes per book, that's over 4 hours of marking, which is extremely unsustainable. It's not productive and it's not efficient. You've got to, I would say marking is good and can be good if the amount of effort you put into it is proportional to the result. So if you're spending 2 minutes of your time marking a book, the pupil needs to spend at least 2 minutes evaluating your work and drawing feedback from it, or you allocate lesson time for them to go through it, or so on. There's got to be some sort of positive response from the pupil to make your marking worthwhile. So what I should do is really amend my controversial point that I'm morally against marking and say that I'm not against marking if it's worthwhile, and that last sort of clause is debatable. Some teachers will say all marking is worthwhile, but I like to have a social life or spend time with my family or friends or whatever. So it is important, but it's got to be useful. So what I thought I'd do is discuss what I think different types of people want from marking. I'll discuss the things that I've tried to introduce to the head of department and what's worked and what hasn't, and then ask for your ideas, what you do, and then we'll go through those responses next week. So, what do people want from marking? Well, students, let's start with those. I actually did an experiment once. It was at my old school, so maybe I can admit it now, but with one of my classes I didn't mark their books. I don't know if it was for 6 months or maybe longer, and at the end of the year I asked them what they liked and didn't like in the maths lessons that year, and the things that they didn't like were things like, they could play more games or listen to more music in class or go to the ICT room more often or whatever, which were all helpful, but not a single pupil said that they wanted their books marked or marked more. So it's interesting. It shows really just how effective marking can be. Maybe they're comparing it against teachers who do mark and think it's not particularly worthwhile. Maybe they benefit from teachers actually investing time in planning excellent lessons. Now, assessment is part of that, and that's what I talked about when I talked about AFL. If you're doing good AFL in a lesson, then the benefit of them bookmarking is maybe not so powerful. But students want, from that experiment, I don't know if they want marking at all, but I guess if they do want marking, they want it to be helpful. They want to be able to use it. I've seen a lecture done by Dylan William, which was very powerful. He gave some evidence that said that actually bad marking can have a negative effect on their progress. So I guess it's probably something to do with morale and enthusiasm for the subject, perhaps. If they keep on getting low scores, for instance, maybe they're not going to work as hard because they just think it's pointless if they do try. So we've got to accommodate for that. We've got to make sure we mark and that the pupils don't get a low morale, that they do actually feel encouraged to try something different. So that's quite a big ask. Ofsted, they're looking for an awful lot when it comes to marking now. They're looking for progress over time. They're looking for sort of use of tracking sheets. The pre and post tests are quite important, but they're looking for that dialogue. They're looking not only for pupils to respond to your marking in an ideal world. They are, if they're being particularly pedantic, they will say that good marking or good use of looking through books will determine future work that's set for that pupil. So what I mean is, if you're, I use maths as an example because I'm a maths teacher, but if, for example, I see that a pupil cannot factorise a quadratic expression, for instance, I might then set him a easier factorising question to which he responds, and then use that response to guide what I do in the future lesson. It seems quite complicated, and it seems very time. It seems to use up a lot of time. Yeah, so the officer seem to want quite a lot. They will no longer just assess the lesson just by looking at a book for that lesson and seeing progress. They want to see it over time. They want to see a story in that book. And actually, anecdotally, I got pulled up on an observation before. The person who observed me said that it would have been an outstanding lesson if it wasn't for the books not showing loads of progress through time. So something worth considering. And then finally, teachers. What do teachers want? Well, we want time. We want time to do marking. We sometimes compare ourselves to schools who rank highly in the PISA tables. So Shanghai, for instance, they might only teach 4 or 5 hours a week and have all that other time observing other teachers and marking and so on. We have almost no time. So we eat into our social lives, into our home lives, into the time we spend with families and sleep. So we want all these things, probably, that students and teachers, students and parents and Ofsted want. We recognise that they're good things, but we just don't have the time to do them. And if we do, then we might have to compromise other things, like planning time. Now, I think it's worth sharing with you a few resources that I put on my Twitter feed, which is at I'm a Teacher 15. Mrs. Humanities posted a really good blog. It's called Marking Feedback and Dirt. And then a teacher toolkit. I put something from them on my feed as well. 12 ways to embrace marking. Both of these are really good, and there's some really, really good ideas in there. There's for instance, double ticking. So if you're, particularly as a language or humanities teacher, and you're reading quite a lot of text, you double tick the bit that you're referring to in the comments, which would be quite helpful. Or you could give pupils a set of criteria and only judge them on those. I guess if you're making sure that that's explicit in your marking, then that could be effective. But all of these things, they're all really great. But again, I go back to the time. I've implemented or been part of plenty of marking schemes and strategies, and it seems difficult to maintain. So what can we do to make marking effective and not use up so much time? That's the thing I'm really asking. So just to put it in some sort of context, something that worked quite well was when you're marking sets of books, write them a question, highlight it, and you know that that's where the pupil's got to respond, so just do a little box. That's quite good, although then, I mean, I've been pulled up before where someone says, so what did you do to that answer that the pupil provided, and then you've got to, in an ideal world, reply to that. So it's a good idea, and I think you can use it, but you've got to think about how far you take the written dialogue. We tried a strategy of feedback books, so we had, with a couple of Year 9 classes, we didn't mark every piece of work, because it's not sustainable. We took, after teaching 1, 2, 3 lessons, I gave them a question based on a lot of the context that we went through, and assessed that single question and put that in an assessment book. And in that assessment book we also put a pre-test and a post-test and tracking sheets, any homework that I marked. So we just had it all in there. Now that was nice, but then you've got the logistics of having 2 sets of books and making sure that they stick all the tracking sheets and pre and post-tests and stuff in the right order, and it was quite good. But then you've got the faff of wasting time at the beginning of the lesson, when again, maybe you could do that teaching them or doing something else. So I question even if that was worthwhile. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on that. The thing that we're going to do in September, which I really wanted to share with you, and I heard this from another head of maths in Norfolk. I wish I could credit her by saying her name, but I don't know her name. What we're going to do now is at the end of each lesson we're just going to say to pupils, if you didn't get this, pass your book in and I'll go through it. Now if you get what the head of department said in another school, from experience she said that you would usually get 5 or less books. Now that seems manageable. I think we can get 5 books in, maybe we have 3, 4, 5 classes a day, but that's still not a huge amount of set of books to mark, and it will only be 1 set of questions perhaps that you're marking. You mark those, give them feedback. Maybe you can use the highlighting technique if you're giving them a question. And I reckon that's quite sustainable. The question I asked immediately after hearing that idea was, what do you do, one, to those pupils who think they're really good and don't hand their book in that way, or those who know they aren't that good and therefore don't hand their book in because they don't want to be criticised perhaps. Well, a way around that would be to print off a class list of each of your classes, and just every time you take in books, just tick who's handed in their book, and then if, say, after 3 or 4 weeks you haven't had a book from Joe Blogs, you ask for their book in, and that's a way around that. And for those people who think, oh, what about if there's 15 people who hand in their books? Well, that there is an excellent opportunity to go over it informs your teaching, and I'd rather know that 15 pupils didn't get it, so that I can use that as a starter perhaps for the following lesson. So if there's 15 people who hand in their books because they just didn't get it, I'll write in their book, we went over this next lesson, and then we do that sort of review the following lesson, and then that's marked then, because you've taken their comments or you've taken that action of them handing in a book, and you've acted upon it. So that's the plan. I'll be interested to hear if anyone else does something similar or have tried it and it did or didn't work. Any feedback on that would be absolutely fantastic. There might have been a couple of other things I was going to mention, but time's escaping, and I wanted this to be under 10 minutes, and that just hasn't happened, so sorry about that. Just as a heads up, next week we're going to be talking about mixed ability teaching. We're doing some mixed ability teaching next year. I'll be interested to hear if people think that's good or bad. I'm going to stop talking now because it's my lunch and I want a sandwich. Thanks very much for watching the video. Please add comments on YouTube or on my Twitter feed, which is I'm a Teacher 15. I'll speak to you soon. See ya.